as in, do you think someone who applies a belief to their life, no matter the situation, do you think of that person as admirable or honorable? I'd love to hear what you think on that. So basically what we're going to be talking about today in today's episode of Teammate Talks is integrity. Integrity is our word of the week here this week, and it can have a lot of meaning. I'm not going to talk about the textbook definition yet. I'm going to talk about the way we talk about it with children. So with kids, we like to start off talking about it because integrity can be hard to describe, right? Like, how would you describe integrity to a child? I'm not asking you because I know how you would do it, but how would you guys describe integrity to a child? The way we like to start with it for kids is talking about keeping your promises or keeping your word, right? Because that's where it kind of starts. That's where integrity starts, is your ability to, if you say you're going to do something to somebody else, that you take care of that, right? Which is the foundation of trust. Hi, Miss Martin. Nice to see
Tiffany.
you. Yeah. And that's the foundation of trust. If you say you're going to do something, do it. And we've also been talking in our classes with the kids about, well, sometimes you'll give your word on something and you're not, you realize a little bit down the road, you're not going to be able to accomplish that. You're not going to be able to do what you said you were going to do. Well, how do you deal with that and still maintain integrity and still keep that trust? Well, that, I think, has to do with honesty. Right? So if you can't complete that promise, you just got to be honest about it. You got to go to them and you have to be forthright. And you have to say, hey, I'm not going to be able to do what I said I'm going to be able to do. Here's my reason, and then come up with a way to make it up to them. Like, here, I'll make it up to you in this way or whatever it is, and put some thought into it, right? So that's a big part of it, a big part of integrity, keeping your word. But that's not the be-all, end-all of it, really. So how I like to describe integrity, how I like to talk about it, especially when I'm talking to adults, is think about something that you believe should be applied to you. As in, this is one of the common examples, do you believe that everybody should be honest with you? Or do you believe that everybody should show you respect? Or do you believe that everybody should be kind to you? Or do you believe that these things are important, right? Do you believe that other people shouldn't give up on their dreams? Things along those lines. If you believe that kind of stuff about yourself, integrity means I am also willing to apply that to other people. So if I believe that everybody should be nice to me no matter what, then to have integrity, I need to also believe that I need to be nice to everybody else no matter what. If I believe that strangers should show me respect, then to have integrity, I also need to believe that I should constantly show strangers respect. And this is something that I get into a lot when we talk about compassion and respect in particular, is almost everybody you walk up to will tell you they're important. Almost everybody you walk up to will say they wish they saw more of it in the world. But the fact of the matter is most people only show it when it's convenient or when they get something out of it. And the fact of the matter is that's not showing your character. That's not showing your virtue. If you only show respect to get something out of it, or you only show compassion to get something out of it, that is not virtuous at all. That is not honorable in the slightest bit, right? Not even close. So what I always talk about is if you believe people should be kind to others, then you've got to go out there and you've got to be kind to others. But the fact of the matter is most people say, well, I believe in compassion. I believe we should care about other people. But the second somebody gets on their nerves, or the second somebody's doing something they don't agree with, or the second somebody has a difference of opinion with them or something along those lines, then they throw that rule out the window. They're like, well, I believe in courtesy. I believe we should be kind to each other. I believe we should care for each other. And then all of a sudden they come across somebody they don't like, and all of a sudden that rule goes out the window. Well, I don't have to be nice to them. I don't have to respect them. I don't have to show care for them because they're jerks and they're not showing care to me, so I'm not going to show care to them. And they give that reciprocity. But if you want to be a person of integrity and you believe in respect, courtesy, compassion, and those sort of things, then you've got to be the example of that at all times.
I've been talking in my classes this week and relating both together how when you decide the kind of person you want to be, when you decide your virtues, you are making a promise to yourself. Mm-hmm. And when you step outside of that, you are breaking that promise to yourself. And well, if you break that promise to yourself, how easy is it to break that promise to somebody else?
Right, and I'm not saying it's easy. Like,
no,
let's go into, me and Miss Rose were discussing, I think his name is Dabrowski. Dabrowski's theory of positive disintegration of personality. Okay, so I know that's a lot of words to explain something, but it's actually a really, really cool concept. It's a very interesting psychological concept that says there's 5 levels to self-awareness and consciousness and positive character development. It's all about character development. And he breaks it down into 5 levels. He talks about level 1 being where most people reside for most of their life, is level 1, which is just wanting to fit in, going along with the crowd, not really being terribly creative or unique, just mostly focused on wanting to be accepted, right? And that type of person will tend to act out of their animalistic part of their subconscious brain. They'll act out of impulse, right? They'll be very impulsive, and all of their impulses are social based, meaning how can I build my social capital, right? And that being level 1. Now, the reason they say most people never get out of that is because level 2 is the hardest, right? And I can trace this back for me about 14, 15 years ago. They say level 2 is the hardest. Level 2 is when you start questioning everything. It's when you start wondering, why do I have these habits? Why do I have these impulses? Why do I feel this way about something?
Why do I need to fit in?
Why do I need to fit in? What kind of things are actually important to me in my life? Now, why is that the hardest and the scariest? Because it causes existential crises. If you're in level 2, you're going to go through existential crisis. You could even go through psychosis. I went through psychosis in it. You can go through extreme depression that can end very, very terribly. And most people, once they get to step 2 and hit that point, they drop straight back down to step 1. Well, this isn't worth it. This isn't worth it. This is terrifying. I want to go back to my old self that was just fine with everything that was going on and just reactionary. That's what I was saying, to everything that's going on, right? And back to level 1. And that's what most people do. So most people hit level 2 at some point in their life, 3, 4, maybe 5 times, but most come back to level 1. Now, in Dabrowski's theory, if you can cross through level 2 and get to level 3, level 3 is the no turning back zone. Level 3 is where you start to pick the virtues and characteristics and traits that you find honorable and admirable, and you begin to try to find places in your life to use them. You begin to train yourself to worry less about what other people think, worry less about fitting in, worry less about those kind of things, and worry more about, well, I believe in courtesy to myself, so I should be courteous to others. I believe in people keeping their word to me, so I should keep my word to others. I believe in trust. I believe in compassion for myself, so I should believe in compassion for others. That's step 3. So this whole thing we're describing is step 3, which is one of the hardest steps to get to in Dabrowski's theory of
Disintegration.
Positive disintegration of personality. And then, of course, step 4, that's where you get into like the really powerful people who have begun to learn how to control their training towards those particular virtues, and that becomes the most important thing to them. And they've learned how to do that in their daily reactions. They've learned how to stop becoming reactionary, and they've learned how to bring about their virtues in each interaction they have, no matter what that is. That's step 4. Then the step 5, that would be the rarest individual. That's the type of person that walks into a room and just has that calmness that calms everybody down. That type of person that just never gets overheated about anything. That type of person that's very, very level. That type of person that seems very, very balanced. That's what Dabrowski said would be level 5 of that. But most people would never get to that point, right? I see y'all talking about my hoodie. Let me get in here. Yes, for you guys that can see the video, this was my birthday present. Christmas present. Sorry, and I love it. It's because I grew up on video games. I still play video games whenever I get sense. Yes, and my name's on it. Yeah. And it's a Nintendo controller. It's a Nintendo controller.
Tiffany, you were correct.
Right. So there's a gas station down the road here that every time I go in there with this jacket on, that's what they're always talking about. There's one lady that'll like make a conversation with everybody in there. It's kind of embarrassing, but yeah, it's what it is. Yeah, and it's really cool. It's a really cool hoodie. Anyway, so back to talking about integrity. So the real key here, the hardest part, is not necessarily deciding what virtues are most important. The hardest part is applying them when your animalistic subconscious emotions want to throw them out. So like when a setback happens and I feel frustration, my subconscious animalistic part of my brain wants to go with that frustration. It wants to build that into anger, and it wants to keep carrying that out. You know what I mean? So the thing is I did an episode not long ago where I talked about how once you experience anger, you have 2 options. You can express it or suppress it, and both of them are a little bit unhealthy in some form or fashion. Now, most people would sit there and tell you that, well, that's normal though. You can't control your emotion, and they're technically right. You cannot control your emotion, but you know what you can control? You can control your triggers to your emotion. So if you start paying attention to what triggers those emotions, what triggers that frustration, what triggers that anger. I'm not saying avoid the trigger. What I'm saying is reframe the trigger, right? So whatever it is that causes that frustration, whatever kind of setbacks that cause that, whether it's things out of left field or surprises, or maybe it's just pet peeves we have with other people, we have this tendency that when that subconscious kicks in and starts to feel frustrated, we have a tendency to run away with it because our brain starts to frame the situation as in blame. Well, it's your fault I'm uncomfortable. It's your fault that I'm annoyed by something that you're doing. It's somebody else's fault that my water pipe burst. It's whatever it might be, right? So whatever your setback or situation is, it could be as simple as someone cutting you off in traffic. It could be as complicated as your house had a water pipe burst and got flooded, right? But it's the same concept. You know what I mean? So let me put it this way. If you were in a house, you had your house, and a water pipe burst and it flooded, what's step one, right? Well, step one would be to turn off the water, right? To try to stop the flood. Well, it's no different. If you want to change your response to triggers, you have to train it, guys. It's not easy. It takes years and years and years of training. Journals help, things like that. But if you want to change it, you don't want to use that blame frame every time you come across a setback or something like that.
No, I like that. Blame frame.
Blame frame. Yeah, you don't want to use the blame frame every time, for the picture, every time that happens. Then think about when that water pipe burst. The first thing you got to do is stop the flood, right? Same thing with emotions. As soon as you feel the burst of emotion, the first thing you have to do is find a way to stop the flood. And the way to do that is to change your blame frame, looking at it in the frame of blaming something else, somebody else, blaming the world, blaming whatever, and instead change that to a different frame. Now, what frame you use is going to be dependent on your personality, right? Everybody's frame is going to be different. Everybody's going to want to use different frames. But like one of my favorites, for example, is I call it the game frame. So this is the concept of as soon as I experience a setback and I start to feel the emotion, I know that I have 5 seconds or less to change the way I'm looking at the situation, or else the emotions are going to take control, and then I have to experience them, and there's no way around it. So in that first 5 seconds, I like to go, okay, let me frame this as a game. So I call that frame the game frame. So, all right, so let me take this setback, the water pipe burst, someone cut me off in traffic, as okay, well, this is a challenge. This is a game to see how well I can manage this inconvenience. How well emotionally can I find a workaround? How well can I manage the emotions and then get to a workaround logically? How quickly can I accept this situation? And then I'll go back and grade myself, right? So if you have, let's just say someone cuts you off in traffic, and normally you'd get a little bit frustrated, but within that first 5 seconds you started thinking, well, this is just a test of my patience. This is a chance for me to show how patient I can be, so you don't get frustrated and you end up finding a workaround, like maybe there's something else you can do while you're waiting in traffic, something along those lines. You find a workaround, you never get frustrated, you arrive where you're going late, but you're still in a decent mood, right? Versus if you would have yelled and cursed, you'd get in a worse and worse and worse mood, and by the time you got to where you were going, you were still late, but now you're in a bad mood. Might as well be in a good mood than a bad mood, right? Yep. So that's the difference between the blame frame and the game frame. Right? Just looking at it a little bit differently before the emotions take over. And then if I graded that, I'd grade my reaction, and 2, I'd grade my workaround. So if my reaction was to be relatively calm, then I get a B, right? I get a B. That's all right. It's not a bad grade. It's not a great grade. If I get a little bit frustrated, but I don't react out of frustration, all right, maybe a B minus, C plus. If the emotions are strong, but I don't outwardly get them out, then maybe that's a C, right? But if the emotion takes over, that's going to be DF, So how do you get an A plus? Well, that takes a lot of practice. I'm not there yet, but that takes enough practice in seeing, let's say you've been practicing the game frame, like I like to use. It takes a lot of training to automatically see those setbacks as a challenge and an opportunity to show your character, to show your honorable traits, to show your resilience or something along those lines. And then when that becomes automatic, and over time, you've done this so many times that you've actually begun to get a sense of satisfaction out of how well you're able to deal with setbacks, how well you're able to come up with creative workarounds, then you can start to get excited about a setback. Well, that would be an A, right? Setback happens, I get a little excited. Ooh, here's my chance to shine, right? I'm really good at coming up with things to deal with stuff like this, creative solutions. And if I get excited about it, well, that's going to be an A plus. That's how I get an A or A plus on that, right? But like I say, it all starts with how we frame it. So what does this have to do with integrity? Well, a lot. It has a lot to do with integrity, because most of the times that we break our own integrity or become a little bit hypocritical, most of those times are going to be times that emotions have taken over. So fact of the matter is, studies have shown this for years and years and years, the stronger the emotion we feel, the more tunnel thought, I don't want to say tunnel vision, but the more tunnel thinking we tend to do. We tend to get stuck into this thought tunnel that we can't get out of, and especially with the strong emotions. And those strong emotions are from the subconscious brain, but it has hijacked the conscious brain and taking the conscious brain along with it.
We're in the Midwest. It should be a thought tornado.
A thought tornado.
A thought tornado.
There you go.
Because you can't escape it.
That's it.
Right?
That's it. So it takes you down that thought tornado, right? And the fact of the matter is the stronger the emotions, the harder it's going to be to deal with the situation in a calm and collected manner. The harder it's going to be to come up with the optimal workaround, right? If I'm emotional, I'm more likely to take the easiest way out than I am to take the best way out, right? But if I'm not emotional about it, then I might be able to actually see the best way out, take the best way out, even if it's not the easiest. So that emotional tornado, as Miss Rose puts it, that emotional tornado is what pulls us away from our beliefs. It pulls us away from our integrity and will cause us to act in a way that is antithetical to whatever it is that we believe. We believe people should be kind to us. We believe we should also believe that we should also be kind to others all the time and things along those lines. But that emotional tornado is what's going to take us away from that. So how do we avoid that emotional tornado? Well, it's not easy, especially for people that actually have neurological imbalances, right? Like myself, I have something that mentally that is described as chemical dumping, meaning that if I'm going to feel an emotion, I'm going to feel it wickedly strong, like all at once. Like any of that chemical my brain has, it's putting it out there all at once in one solid punch, right? So,
go big or go home.
So this is why this concept is so important to me, because I've learned that even though my brain is a little bit broken and tends to dump all the chemicals at once when I feel something, I also recognize that if I can change the frame, I can change the way that I look at something, I can change the way I characterize about something in the first 5 seconds, not 5 minutes, in the first 5 seconds of it happening, if I can teach myself to be automatic about that, which I've had moments, right? Then I don't even have to feel the emotion. My brain will never dump the chemicals because there's no reason to, right? So we have two parts of our brain. If we're going to cut this down, we've got the subconscious and the conscious, right? We're just talking psychologically here. The fact of the matter is both of them have control over the other, right? The subconscious brain, you can think of that as the more animalistic brain, right? That's the part that's going to control those emotions, that chemical dumping, and some of the automatic things that your body needs to live. And that's very, very important. Your conscious brain, it controls the logic, your ability to see your way through a situation, your ability to change the way you look at a situation, and things like that. And fact of the matter is the subconscious likes to take control of the conscious whenever it can. And it does that through strong emotions. The conscious will often tend to take a back seat to the subconscious, but the conscious can also control the subconscious by changing the way that it looks at something. So if the subconscious starts to rise up with these negative, intense emotions, the consciousness can not suppress it, but actually just get it to be quiet by simply looking at it as, is this anger going to help me? Because the stronger the emotion I feel, the less likely I'm going to be able to deal with this well, right? And those are just two frames, you know. You could use other frames. I use the blame frame, the game frame. Those are the ones I like to look at. But if you can characterize something as a challenge, maybe the challenge frame is good for you. Oh, here's a challenge. Or call it the character frame or the virtue frame. The virtue frame would be, I'm going to look at this situation and what honorable trait that I believe in is this a chance to show, right? So that would be like the challenge frame, or the honorable frame would be, okay, what's the most honorable way I can deal with this? What's the most admirable trait I have, and how can it be used to deal with this? And that's just another type of frame you can use. Like I said, everybody's frame might be a little bit different, but we all tend to start with the blame frame. We all tend to start there. And then
kind of a psychological default.
Right, it's the default setting. And so you just have to train yourself to see out of different frames. I mean, how many of you guys have known an extremely optimistic person? I mean, somebody that can laugh about anything, doesn't ever necessarily seem to be down. It's not that they're not down. They feel sadness and things along those lines too, right? Everybody has these emotions, but they have learned a way that once they feel an emotion triggered, they've learned a way to reframe it to make it easier to cope with. That's what a lot of these people who seem to be able to deal with setbacks so easily, or who are eternal optimists, that's really their secret, right? Is they found a way to just look for the silver lining. They found a way to look at things. We've all heard all the little quips like, look for the silver lining, but we've heard all that stuff from the time we were little kids. But the fact of the matter is no one really talks about how to apply that psychologically. Like, no one really talks about how to do that. Fact of the matter is once you've allowed the emotion to settle in There is no looking for the silver lining. Your conscious brain is not going to do it. So one of the ways I heard a psychologist describe this once, and I really liked it, was the subconscious brain, the conscious brain. So the subconscious brain is the animalistic brain. So we got animalistic impulsive behavior. If we go back to Dabrowski's theory about positive disintegration of personality, that's going to be that stage one. Most people in stage one, they're impulsive. They're following that animalistic emotion, right? So whatever emotion they experience, that's going to change the way they react to that situation. So that's the animalistic side of the brain. The conscious side of the brain, I've heard referred to as the divine side of the brain. And I like the way the psychology, you can use any term, but I like the way they use this. Okay, so you have this animalistic brain that wants to act like a dog or a tiger or a lion or whatever. And then you have this other part of your brain that's a little bit different, the conscious part of your brain, which is a little more divine. Now the thing is they both have to work in tandem with each other, right? Either one of them can have some amount of control of the other. Each one has their own particular jobs that the other can't touch, but each one has some amount of control over the other. So just like your subconscious can make you think a certain way by giving you a certain feeling, your conscious can prevent you from having that feeling in the first place by denying the way the subconscious wants to look at it and instead looking at it in a different frame. That's what I'm trying to say. In psychology, they call this the framing effect. The way that you look at something greatly alters the way that you feel about it. Now, once that first 5 seconds has passed and the emotion is set in, it's too late. It's too late. Because at that point, you have to feel the emotion. At that point, you have to acknowledge the emotion. You have to try to deal with it in a healthy way. That's a normal emotion, right? And so that's why a lot of people just deal with the emotions. Because they're like, well, it's normal emotion. Everybody has that emotion. And that's true. But you can, and I've seen it done in certain people, you can train yourself to not have to deal with the emotion in the first place if you could do it looking at it in a different way within the first 5 seconds. So, by the way, on Instagram, thank you, Miss DeWitt. I appreciate your comment. Love to see anything else you guys have to say about this. So, framing has to do with integrity, right? So if you feel like a person should be strong to their values, that's integrity. You feel like a person should keep their word, that's integrity. But if you're going to be hard on people about making sure that they keep up with their word and their courtesy and their respect, then you need to be hard on yourself as well. And the second you let yourself get overly emotional, that 5 seconds has passed and you're still in the blame frame about something, whether you express it, suppress it, or otherwise, you're damaging yourself, and you could even be damaging a relationship you have with somebody or something along those lines, right? And it's going to make you do things and say things that are antithetical to those beliefs that you hold. If you believe courtesy is important, you believe respect is important, but then someone says something mean and I get angry at that 5 second mark and I stay angry, well, suddenly I'm not going to be showing the respect, right? Well, why should I show respect? They're not showing respect to me. Because teach them. Be the example. Because the thing is if someone shows you an extreme amount of disrespect, and no matter how the situation goes for them, if you show an extreme amount of respect in the situation, think about a third-party onlooker. Who are they going to look at and be like, that guy's admirable the way he handles that? The calm one, the one who manages to stay respectful. I mean, you draw boundaries. Everybody should have boundaries. But the one who manages to stay respectful. But if you let it, and so you have to change that frame, right? So instead of blaming them, well, they're mean to me, so I blame them for feeling bad. So now that I feel bad, I want to make them feel bad. Well, that's not being, that's perpetuating the cycle. That's not living with integrity. So if you think respect is important, and that person's being really disrespectful, I might tell them, hey, you're being disrespectful. You could use a little bit more courtesy in this situation. You can be forthright. You can set those boundaries, and you can even be a little bit aggressive. You can even have a little bit of conflict, but you can do it in a way that is still respectful as long as you don't let the emotions run away with you.
Yeah.
Right?
Really, integrity, like training yourself to actually follow through with your integrity, with your beliefs, is really just raising the EIA of the room. And by that I mean, so think about GPA, grade point average. EIA is emotional intelligence average. We are working to raise that EIA around us. Yeah. And if we are not working to raise that emotional intelligence average,
then we're dropping to the average of the room. We're dropping below. Or below. Right. And like I say, it has a lot to do with that initial reaction. But usually you got about 5 seconds where you can change the frame before the emotions get going. You know what I mean? You got about 5 seconds that you can change the way you look at it. which is why, by the way, Thomas Jefferson wrote something, I cannot remember the title of it right offhand, but it was about dealing with anger. And yes, Thomas Jefferson, founding father, yes, he wrote something about dealing with anger. He's the original person that wrote, when you feel angry, count to 10. You know why he said that? Let's think about this for a second. Counting to 10 takes how long? Takes 5 seconds. Counting to 10 takes about 5 seconds. And I was just talking to one of our students who happens to be in the mental health field, and they were saying you can take that one step farther with kids and count out of order with them. Because the logic brain can't stand the chaos of the pattern. So when they're in the emotional, animalistic, subconscious brain, and you make them count out of order, the logical brain suddenly goes, wait, I need more power to figure out what this means.
And so it goes away from the
and
emotion
it balances the subconscious reaction.
Beautiful trick.
It is a beautiful trick. Now, it's not something you can easily do with yourself, but there's your little trick for kids, though. Feeling overly emotional, have them count to 10 with you, but make them count out of order, like you count out of order, and have them repeat after you, because the confusion will break the emotional cycle. The confusion will help kind of break that to a certain extent, right? And then you can look at change. Now, that's more anger management than not having the anger at all. What I'm talking about here with the framing effect, this is in psychology, it's in cognitive behavioral therapy, but these concepts have been around for about 4,000 years in texts, right? There's tons of Greek schools of philosophy, Roman schools of philosophy that talked about this, that talked about rewiring the brain, essentially, through changing the way you look at a situation, and this was a big part of philosophy way back then, I had one other thing I was gonna add to this, but I've kind of lost it. Do you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I don't think so. I think we've done a big range of the subject, actually, in
yeah, I guess we kind of have. So I say it has to do, and it all comes back to integrity. If you believe in something, making sure that you live it, and not being reciprocal. That's what I was going to say. And it's not just about not being reciprocal. So let's say we experience that negative emotion, right? We experience that anger, whatever it is, that destructive emotion. But let's say we could either express it at the person that we feel made us angry. Now think about that. Think about that phrase. They made me angry. That's the blame frame. That right there, that's how you figure out that you tend to look through the blame frame. They made me feel this way. They did this to me. That's the blame frame, right? But let's say I have the chance that I can either express that emotion to them, and if I can stay calm, right? I can change the way I look at it, like we've been talking about. I can stay calm, and I can handle it in ways that most people would consider admirable and honorable by staying calm. Or I can let myself feel the emotion, stay in the blame frame. I can express that emotion to them, which is going to escalate them even higher. No one's going to change their mind. This is just escalating a conflict that's not going to solve anything. There's not going to be any compromise. It's just going to be bad. So now so let's think of it this way. Let's say someone else is angry at us for some reason. Let's just say they're angry at us. That's one person feeling a destructive emotion. Then they do something, and you decide the thing they did or said makes you angry. Well, they spread that anger. Now that's two. That's two people experiencing a terrible emotion. Now let's say you went through that, you're feeling that terrible emotion, and then you go vent to a friend. This is why I don't like venting. Venting is essentially putting yourself in an echo chamber. It's essentially going somewhere else because you're starting to feel guilty about the way that you felt and the way you acted. So you go to somebody else to try to get them to validate what you did, right? So now that I've went to somebody else, I'm asking them to at least sympathize with me or even empathize with me and feel frustrated at the situation too. Now there's three people. So and whose fault is that anger spread? It's mine. And I spread that to three people. It started with the one. I let it spread to me, right? Then I let it spread to anybody that I try to vent with, or anybody that I try to get. I mean, it's one thing to go ask for advice unemotionally and calm. That's normal. I don't want to say asking for advice is a terrible thing. But if you go and you express those emotions to a third party and trying to get them to feel as strongly as you do, or at least trying to get them to validate the way that you feel, where you're spreading that negative emotion to them too. And I feel like that's just irresponsible, right? As trying to be just a good human being, I think that the goal should be to have as few people as possible involved. in that negative emotion. If I experience a negative emotion, and I say this to one guy, then it's me, that's two, well, I'm not going to go to a third person until I'm calm. I might go to a third person when I'm calm and ask for advice on how to deal with them. But I'm not going to spread that to a third person by venting and expressing that anger to a third, fourth, fifth, sixth person, right? Now, what I could have done, though, is if I'd done this framing effect thing, right, and I changed from the blame frame to the gain frame, or the blame frame to the patience frame, like, how can I deal with this in the most honorable fashion? And when you're able to do that, you almost look at tough situations like they're fun. They almost begin to get fun because you see them as a challenge in the same way you see a video game as a challenge. Easy video games are not fun. Challenging video games are, right? So if I see that as a challenge to overcome, over time I might be able to actually have a little bit of fun in trying to deal with it. So if they get angry and I'm able to change the way I look at it, the frame I'm looking at it at the very, very beginning, then the anger never reaches two people. It only stays at one. Unless they go vent to somebody else, then that's them spreading their anger. But that's them, that's not you, right? But if someone gets angry at you or gets in your face and you're able to change the frame of that and even find it maybe a little bit funny and respond in a much more calm and laid back manner, well, you've now not let their emotions spread to you, which means you are not in any danger of spreading that emotion to anybody else. The only person that's in danger of doing that is the other person. And by that, you can cut how many people have to be in contact with a destructive emotion in half, literally in half.
So think about it this way. We're reframing it just to make a little more sense if it doesn't already. Imagine the framing effect as washing your hands.
Yeah.
When you go to the bathroom, when you're done, you wash your hands so you don't spread germs.
Right, so here's a setback. Here's something that happened. Here's someone getting in my face. Here's someone cutting me off in traffic. Here's a water pipe burst or whatever else. Okay, so before I do anything, let me look at it through a good lens. Let me look at it through rose-tinted glasses. Let me look at this through the best way I can. Well, obviously it's a negative situation, but that doesn't mean I have to look at it negatively. It can mean like I could just do. And one of my favorite frames, I forgot to mention this one. Another one of my favorite frames is what I call the action frame. So that's where before the emotion sets in, I go straight to the action phase. And I go, as soon as the setback happens, I go straight to the, what do I need to do about it? Boom, 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 boom. Unemotionally, just what needs done. And I think a lot of people have that reaction to a water pipe burst at first. Well, I know I need to turn off the water. I know I need to do this. I know I need to call a plumber. But then they'll let that negative emotion catch up to them later. But what I'm talking about is just doing those things, taking those actions, and then being like, all right, that's all I can do about it. Yep. Done. I've done my part. Yep. And letting it go and moving past it, right? I've done my part. Or if someone cuts us off in traffic, immediately going, is there anything I can do about this? Nope. Well, then I'm not going to worry about that. I'm instead going to do something else. I'm going to entertain myself. I'm going to sing a song on the radio. I'm going to, if it's like stuck in traffic, maybe I check my email, there's something to occupy the time. Let's say I'm traveling, and I have a hotel reservation, and I show up to the hotel, and they say, well, it turns out, we don't have a room. Most people would get really frustrated. Oh, no, what am I going to do? They would blame the hotel, or they'd blame the guy behind the desk who probably had nothing to do with it, right? Or you can go, well, this is life, God, whatever you want to call it, testing my patience again, testing my ability to come up with creative workarounds. So instead of getting angry about it, I'm going to say, well, this is me just being tested to see how strong my character is. So let's see how strongly I can relate to this. So step one, what can I do about it? Well, I can look for another hotel. I can make a few calls, right? I can do a couple things. I can also, like I was homeless at 16. I didn't know how to sleep in my truck. Like maybe I can find a parking lot to sleep in that has cameras and stuff, so I feel relatively safe. Whatever it is, and then accept the situation for the way it is. Have patience with the situation. So if I wind up having to sleep in my truck, not being upset about it. It's not a step backwards. I still have a bed at home and things like that. Call it an adventure. Call it the adventure frame, right? Yep. Frame the concept as, oh, well, this is going to be an adventure. This is something that we're going to rough it for a night. We're going to sleep in the truck. We're going to camp out, whatever it is. That would be another frame that you might be able to use to replace the brain frame with. Call it the adventure frame. If you like fantasy novels or science fiction novels, the adventure frame might end up being your favorite, right? So all fantasy and sci-fi novels start with a character often that doesn't want anything different, that's like in their comfort zone, and they enjoy things the way they are. Like think The Hobbit, right? And then something comes along to shake up their life, and then it's setback after setback and trial and tribulation and challenge after challenge after challenge. And the more they meet those challenges, the better mentally they begin to meet those challenges, the more confidence they have. And by the time they get back home at the end of the book, they're a completely different person. They're a much stronger person. They have a much stronger character. They have much more confidence. They have much more ability. So you can look at setbacks in your life the same way by using what I would call the adventure frame or the hero frame, right? So as soon as I notice, oh, the blame frame, I'm blaming this person, then I can ask myself, what would my favorite novel hero do, right? What would make this adventurous? Like instead of being upset, I could make myself excited about it as an adventure, you know. So I'm just giving you options of different frames you can use. This is all part of the framing effect. Just look that up. Just type that into Google, framing effect. You'll see exactly what I mean.
And all of this, the framing effect helps us not spread our anger like germs, right? It's just like washing your hands, not spreading anger like germs.
It helps us to not have to deal with the damage internally too. It helps us to not have to deal with that damage internally
and not
ourselves.
Breaking that integrity promise to
Right.
ourselves.
So like I was saying, like I'm diagnosed with something that involves chemical dumping of the brain. But what I've learned is once it dumps, there's nothing I can do about it. I can't control that. I've tried for years to control that, and I've learned like that's not controllable. Like that is out of my hands. But you know what I can control? I can retrain the way that I frame a situation. And I can try to train that to become automatic. Every time some little setback happens, become automatic. Like yesterday, I had a situation. I graded myself about a B-. Like I could have done a lot better. But Miss Rose would start my car for me. And it's a standard. And it's a very quiet, tiny little car.
It is. It's a little Matchbox car. It's super cute.
Maybe this is what happened. Maybe it's not. We don't really know what happened. But she was going to start my car for me. I come out 10 minutes later. The key's on. Car's not running. It's dead. Battery's dead. Needs to jump.
Now I know how to actually start a standard. This is not
right.
This is not my first time.
But the shifter's a tight shifter, right? It's a very short throw shifter. So I think when she was shaking it for neutral, I think she was holding the clutch and it slipped up into fifth gear. Now in fifth gear, there's not going to be enough torque. So when you let off that clutch, you're not going to feel the car jump when it dies. It just kind of dies. And it's a quiet car, so you're not going to hear it. So that's what kind of thing happened.
It probably is.
Now, for that one, I used the action frame. So the first thing I thought was, thought she started the car for me. And then I saw her walking behind me. I saw her walking across behind me, and I was like, hey, I thought you started the car. And she's like, I did. Well, I was like, well, it's not running. The key's on, and it's dead. Like, it's going to need a jump. And so I went straight to, okay, where are the jumper cables? And it's cold outside. It's like 14 degrees.
So cold.
So I go get the jumper cables. We get it taken care of. And I go on my way. Why did I grade myself a B-? Because I thought, well, I did all right. I never felt the frustration. I instantly changed the frame from blaming her or blaming the car or blaming anything else to an action frame. Okay, well, what needs done?
I thought you did a great job.
Acceptance frame. And it's, okay, well, what needs done? So we do what needs done, and then I move on. And I don't let that bother me for the rest of the day, right? Okay, well, done. I'm not going to let it bother me for the rest of the day. And
it
so
didn't really put you behind schedule.
No, so I gave myself a B on emotional response, but I gave myself an A on workaround response. Like that's as well as you can work around that situation. That's what you do.
Yeah.
So just to go back to that grading scale we were talking about earlier and how you can work on different frames. So this is what I mean about being able to apply it in every little situation you're in. But before you can apply it, as Dabrowski said, it's step 1, you have to become aware of it, which is step 2. You have to become aware of the frame you look at things. You have to become aware of your automatic, subconscious, animalistic, emotional responses. And then you have to figure out a way to get your conscious, divine energy brain, whatever you want to call it, to find a way to control that. You know what I mean? To find a way to... And the conscious brain can't so much control the subconscious as it can cut it off. The conscious brain can cut it off and say, nope, we're not going to feel that way about this. We're going to move on. But it only has a short window. It only has a short window to do that. So that goes going back to Dabrowski's theory. That's the step 1, animalistic. So I could have got frustrated, muttered a couple of curse words, yelled at her a little bit. Still made it through the workaround, stomping my way around out in the cold, which probably would have made me, have to try even harder to hook the jumper cables up because whatever, because I'm shaking out of anger or whatever. Then it would have followed me until I got to work, and then I'd have still been frustrated about it.
And I would have been upset.
Trying to do that, and then I would have also started to feel guilty because I knew she was upset, and then all that done would make a bunch of negative emotions across a bunch of people, right? So by being able to change the frame, you can change the whole thing. And I say that this helps. This helps a lot, even if you're diagnosed with something, even if you're medicated for something. This is why this is a big part of cognitive behavioral therapy, because even people who are diagnosed and medicated are often do therapy. And this is one of the big things therapists try to get across to them is how, okay, well, you can't control necessarily your emotion, but you can, if you're quick enough and you train hard enough and you become self-aware enough, you can control the trigger. you can cut the trigger off, right? And so that's the tricky part, though. That's the tricky part, and that's why I say Dabrowski's theory, step 2. That's where it's very, very hard. It usually leads to serious depression, even psychosis. Usually leads to an existential crisis, because everything that you lived in, that you thought was comfortable, everything you believed about the world, you're suddenly questioning. Everything you knew about virtue and character, you're suddenly questioning, and so you're lost, right? Step 2 is getting lost. So step 1, acting animalistic. Step 2, getting lost in realizing how animalistic you are. One of the great ways to do this, read books on marketing. Read books on persuasion. Robert Cialdini has a great one. Dr. Robert Cialdini, he has a book called Persuasion.
2 good ones, actually.
2 good ones. Read those, and you'll understand how so many people in the world use your animalistic impulses to control what you think, and to control what you buy, and to control what you look at.
You'll never want to buy anything ever.
Right. It'll make you rethink a lot of stuff you see, right? And that would be the step 2, right? The realization that I am acting in an animalistic behavior way. I'm not fully in control of how I'm acting. That's step 2. And then finding out all those places that I'm not in full control. And then step 3 is what virtues, what characteristics can I implement in my life that I feel like are important, that can allow me to have that kind of control. And the framing effect is a really big step. But to get out of step 2 and into step 3, if you're going by Dabrowski's theory.
And Brady, it's okay that you didn't realize, because I mean, you guys have been, you've had
I hope
COVID.
it's Dabrowski. I'm not saying his name wrong.
But
Okay.
you guys have had COVID. Like, all of you guys have had COVID for the last week, and so things
Yeah, and here's the
not
other thing.
feeling good.
If you grade yourself low on your response to something, let it go.
Yeah.
Okay, I graded myself low. Let it go. Well, tomorrow, see if I can do something a little higher. Let that go. Don't hold that guilt, right? Because that guilt makes it worse. It's kind of like, there was a lady, I can't remember her name. She's really famous for coming up with the 5 stages of grief.
Oh my gosh. I can't
Yeah,
remember.
she's really famous
We
for
were talking about this.
Kruger. I can't remember. She's really famous for coming up with the 5 stages of grief. And what I like, this is a very interesting part of psychology for me, is that's hotly contested. Not that there are 5 stages of grief, like that's pretty obvious, but whether experiencing all of those stages of grief is actually the best way to experience grief, or does it undermine our own mental resiliency by constantly making us relive the situation through different frames, the denial frame, the bargaining frame, and all of that, instead of getting to the acceptance frame, right? And that's still hotly contested in psychology as to whether a person should go through those first 5 or those first 4. And one of the things that people realize about it, or psychologists talk about with this, is that most of the negative steps to grief, which are denial, bargaining, and things like that, like the acceptance, the final one, that's the positive step you're trying to get to. But all of the first 4 negative steps are not generally caused by loss. They're generally caused by guilt about the loss. Oh, I never got to do this thing with them. I never treated them as well as I should have treated them if you lost a loved one, right? Or
So you're in the guilt frame.
Or I lost my temper with this person, so that's the guilt frame. You start to feel guilty. And through that guilt, that's where you're going to feel denial, bargaining, and things like that. So if you can learn to manage guilt, then you can learn to not have to deal with the first 4 stages of grief, go straight to acceptance. This is another part of behavioral therapy, right? Grief counseling is different. They try to get you to face each of the steps of grief, but a lot of psychologists have done a lot of studies believe, well, that kind of undermines the natural resiliency of the brain, right? It'd be better off left to its own devices because it's more likely to get to the acceptance frame faster.
Plus, if I'm, and I know this is just from my point of view, but if I'm made to face this trauma that I feel guilty about over and over and over again, how am I going to be able to look at someone else and accept where they're at today, and not get frustrated with them and feel like they're imposing on me?
Guilt can be one of the worst feelings. Guilt can be one of the worst feelings, and it can affect your integrity. It can affect everything. And here's the bad news. There's only one way to control guilt. There's only one way to control guilt. And that's don't do things to make you feel guilty. That's live by your virtues. Don't let your emotions take the best of you. The only one way to deal with guilt is to be grateful regularly, every day. Try to think of something you're grateful or thankful for so that you're less likely to take it for granted.
Yeah.
Taking it for granted tends to be the biggest part of guilt. So finding a way to be thankful for things is going to help you to treat those things, those people, whatever, better, and you're going to be less likely to feel guilty about it later. But once you feel guilty, there is no way out of that but acceptance. The only way to deal with guilt once you feel it is you have to accept it. You have to accept that what you feel guilty about it, you did. You have to accept that what you feel guilty about, it will always be, it is done. And you have to accept it to the point of trying to find a way to not get it to keep coming back up, right? Not to get it to keep flaring up as constant, like PTSD and things like that, and not have that constant guilt flare up. And honestly, the only way to do that is to forgive yourself. The only way to do that is to accept the guilt, number one, to forgive yourself, number two, and then to promise yourself, integrity, keep your word, promise yourself that you are not going to put yourself in that situation again, that you're not going to allow that behavior from yourself again. You're not going to allow that thing to happen again, and you're going to find every way that you can to prevent it. Now, that doesn't mean you're always going to be able to find a way to prevent it. Like someone with bipolar, they're going to feel this. They're going to have this over and over and over again. No matter how much they try to control it, it's going to keep happening unless they can learn to change their frame. That's the thing. It's all in the frame.
Frame it in gratefulness. Man, I really hate that happened, but I'm grateful for the experience because now I can be better.
Right.
Now I can make better choices. I can make better decisions.
I can do it better in the future. And it's still going to bother you. It's still going to come up in the middle of the night. Like
But
guilt
just
is
reframe
the
yourself.
worst of the destructive emotions, man.
But you have to, when you start to feel that, just like anger, you have to say, that really stinks, but I'm grateful I had the experience.
Yeah. Guilt is the worst of the destructive emotions because there's very, very little you can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very little you can do about it. Like you can make up other things, anger outbursts or things like that, but guilt, that's tough.
Yeah.
That's a very tough one. Anyway, we've been on here for too long. We got a little bit of a family trip planned, so I've got to jump off here. It was a great discussion. Thank you, everybody, for leaving your comments. Don't forget to grab the last few spots to our Parents' Night Out coming soon. Oh, our badges. Our little Word of the Week badges changed.
I put a post up in our group.
Yeah, to check out that out in Peace Warriors Teammate Forum. If you're interested in anything that we do and you're not a member here or you don't know our Teammate Children's Stories or anything like that, you can follow Teammate Children's Stories. That's our books. We do rhyme books, moral books, bedtime stories. You can also follow our Teammate Children's Stories page or our Peace Warriors Martial Arts page. You can find any of our podcast episodes, which are very similar to this one, by searching by searching hashtag Teammate Talks anywhere you get your podcast. Don't worry about the PWMA part. That's something entirely different. And the badges have changed. If you want to check that out or you're interested in classes or want to see what we do, join our Facebook group, the Teammate Forum, Peace Warriors Teammate Forum. So until we see you guys again, be the best teammate you can be the best at being you, and thank you, Ms. DeWitt. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I always wonder about that with these discussions because sometimes I run into people where it goes over their head or they say I ramble too much or they say I put too much detail in, but I feel like it's best if we talk about the applications and we talk about actual situations and things like that. So it's a lot to it. So until we see you guys again, be the best teammates you can be and be the best at being you.